Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap up and should you read the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, one of my favourite series that I've read in 2022. One of the few series that I finished, one of the big series that I finished, and I guess one of the highlights of my year, and talking through why I think you should read it and sort of if this series would be for you. If you like this, then I think you should give this series a try. If you don't like this, then maybe this series won't be for you. And just talking through sort of the plot, the characters, and my overall thoughts and feelings about this massive series. Well, not massive, like massive in terms of like the length of the books, because I know there's only 4 of them, but they're very long. I'm not going to hold it up for the whole video because heavy, but maybe I'll hold up The Grace of Kings. Starting off with the plot. And the plot of The Grace of Kings. So The Grace of Kings is the first book in the series. It is, for me, I would say, sort of a prologue to the wider series, and it acts like a historical prologue. And in some ways, for me, I feel as though the figures in this are sort of seen as historical figures for the rest of the series. That they end up not being our main characters for the rest of the series, but it really sets up the world. It sets up this historical China that is based on real history, but with a few magical, fantastical elements, the sort of grounding blocks for this world and for our characters and the events that they go through in the rest of the series. I will say this book, to me, it read very historical. It read very, very historical, and as though we're seeing a snapshot of these characters and their lives and what they go through and the events that they go through, and sort of as though you're held at a little bit of a distance. And then the rest of the series is sort of the after effects of this first book and the events that happened in here, and then some much wider events that then come along. And I grew much more attached to the characters in the second, third and fourth book, and the events that was happening to them. I felt that I was at a much closer connection. It's a very political series. There's lots of politics, lots of machinations, lots of people vying for power and dominance over this world. There's also that these politics turn into battles. There are conflicts, there are very, very clever people using their brains and their skills to win and to manipulate the situation and to manipulate characters. Then there is also the magic. I think in this first book it is very limited magic, that you are presented with some of the gods of the world, and these gods sort of overlooking the events that the humans are doing upon the earth, and also in terms of some fantastical creatures, some fantastical elements, but the majority of this is historical, and then some of the more fantastical elements are engineering related. I believe the term for this sort of series is silk punk, although I am not too versed in the steampunk, silk punk area of fantasy. But just as a heads up, if you're going into this expecting lots of fantastical elements, you won't get it so much in this first one, but you will get it more as the series goes on. I think it's a very intricate world, and it's very intricately built, that everything is there for a reason, and that it is all you can see how well crafted it is. It feels real, and I mean, it is based on real world events and real history, so there is that element to it, but these characters definitely stand alone, especially as the series goes on, as it diverges, and definitely diverges from the historical. So if that sounds interesting, that's sort of like the basic overview of this first book. And I won't go too much into the plots of the rest of the series, apart from saying that it is political. There is some things do get wider and wider as the series goes on. It does get more and more fantastical, and there is, I would say, probably more and more conflict, and it gets darker, I think, as well as the series goes on, and there are some very gruesome scenes in it as well. I don't necessarily think as though this series is grimdark, but there are probably some grimdark elements to it. So the writing style of the series, I think, is a little bit hard to explain. I was trying to think about the writing style and who I would compare this to, but I don't really know who I would compare this writing style to, because I don't think it's overly direct. It's not like a Sanderson where it's very straightforward, but I don't think it's also very purpley prose either. It's not overly descriptive, but then I don't think it's not descriptive either. It sort of sits in between them, I would say. That there are some passages and phrases which are very, very poignant, and it definitely evokes emotion in me that I was not so much in this first book, but as the series went on, there were definitely some tears that were shed. So it was definitely an emotive writing style, but it's hard for me to say exactly how to describe it. I do think it is on the slightly slower paced in some instances, that particularly in this first book for me, I think I was more engaged as the series went on, but these are long books, so there are definitely peaks and troughs in the pacing. I think in general the series is very well paced in general, and there are some instances where I was like, this could be a little bit quicker, but there are other times where I was like, I cannot put this book down, this is just racing along. And there is these instances where you're in a battle scene where you then jump back in time to understand how that battle was constructed, or how they made this magical weapon, which I think disrupts the pace a little bit. So there is some sort of slower moments as it is very political, but also some parts, especially towards the ends of each book, where they definitely were very fast-paced and very engaging. I will say I was a bit underwhelmed by this first book. The way I've talked so far is that I've praised this series quite a lot, and that it's one of my favourites of the year. And I think as a whole, when you're looking at the whole series is definitely a favourite of the year. But that is probably books 2, 3 and 4. I found that this one was, I struggled to connect this one. I think I gave this about 3.5 stars, whereas the rest of the series is probably 5 to 4.5 stars. So there's definitely a step up for me from this first book to the rest of the series. And that is because I think this does sort of stand as like a historical prologue to the rest of the series, and that I was much more connected to the characters and to the events in the rest of the series. So I would say if you have read this, and potentially you love this one as well, potentially you did, but if you didn't love this one, then I do think it is definitely worth continuing. From the first like 50 pages, maybe 50 to 100 pages of Wall of Storms, the second book, I knew that I was going to have a very different opinion to that book, to this one, that I was instantly more engaged in it than this one. I would definitely recommend continuing if you are hesitant after reading this. As well, if you haven't started the series, then I don't think that this is a representation of the series as a whole. On if you should read this, I think this series will really work if you enjoy politics and politic heavy books, as well as battle scenes. It combines battle scenes as well, and I think the battle scenes are typically very, very well done, and the elements that are in them, but also the sort of this engineering and this technology, and being able, the cleverness of some people and the long game that some people play, maybe even from like the beginning of the series through to the end, this game that of politics that some characters are playing. Maybe, yeah, if you are interested in engineering, I'm not so much, but I do find it interesting to see how they work around the technology in this, and they can be very, very clever. Also, if you don't mind having the less limited magic, that it is very historical, so I don't know if this will work for people that are not so interested in a historical setting for a book. If you like your fantasies to be very magical, to have lots of fantastical elements, which I think do come in as the series goes on, but for this first book particularly, there is very limited magic, and I know that that can be a deciding factor for some people on if they decide to pick a series up or not. And then as well, just I did mention it, the darker tones, and I do think these darker tones come in more as the series goes on. That it starts off and it is quite a political fantasy, but as it goes on there are some very grim scenes, particularly in books 3 and books 4. I would say that there were definitely some scenes where I was like, that's just a little bit too much for me. I don't need this level of detail. I don't even want to think about that. I think when I'm reading, I'm a little bit better with the grimmer scenes. If I was watching that on TV, I would have like my hands over my eyes. I'd be telling my boyfriend to like, just tell me when it's over because I don't want to watch this. So there are definitely some more scenes with torture and the depravity that some humans go to. And judging from what I have seen of Ken Liu, both in his short stories and some of the interviews that he's done, he definitely pulls from real world events when he is writing, and real history and real things. So you're like, these things probably happened to somebody somewhere. Really unpleasant. That's really unpleasant. Why would humans do that? If you're okay with the grimness, then I would definitely recommend this series. So those are some sort of like top line thoughts on the Dandelion Dynasty. I overall would definitely recommend this. I would so recommend this, and it has been a highlight of my year and one of the series that I think is definitely going to be sticking with me, particularly The Wall of Storms, which I loved this book. I love this book. I don't want to overhype it because I went into this with lower expectations. I guess I read this, thought it was like a 3.5 stars, and so when I went into this I was like, we'll keep trying with this series, but I'm not obsessed. And then that created the obsession. I hope that set your expectations maybe for the series, what you might be going into, if you think it could be for you or not. It is a big undertaking in terms of that it It is long. The final 2 books are over 1,000 pages. So it is like 3,500 pages, maybe. So definitely on the longer side of things, and it does take a little while to read, but I do think it is very much worth it, that I had a lot of fun reading this series with these characters, and I'm a little bit sad that it's over. That I don't quite know what to do with myself now that I've finished this series, because I do have some more Ken Liu. I have a couple more short stories, but I cannot wait for him to put out another series, because I had so much fun reading this and being with these characters, and I'm a bit sad to let them go now. I'm sad to let them go, and I was quite sad when I finished the final book. Not necessarily because of the ending, just that I was satisfied but sad to finish the series and know that I didn't have any more. That's the feelings that it evoked in me. Let me know if I've helped you decide if you're going to pick this series up, or if you've already read this series and you enjoyed hearing my thoughts. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!